Day 207 of the war in Gaza. 2 reservists were killed in the ongoing war with Hamas. Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke over the Israeli holiday weekend and discussed the war. The potential IDF Rafah operation and efforts to reach a hostage deal topped the agenda. ILTV's Steve Leibovitz reports.
The White House said that Joe Biden reiterated his clear position on Israel's looming plans for an operation in Gaza's southernmost city of Rafah. The U.S. has said it cannot support the operation unless Israel can ensure the full protection of the more than 1 million Palestinians sheltering there. Secretary Blinken is due back in Israel for further discussions.
That's going to be right at the top of the list for Secretary Blinken, to keep pushing for this temporary ceasefire. We want it to last for about 6 weeks. It would allow for all those hostages to get out and, of course, to allow for easier aid access to places in Gaza, particularly up in the north. So he's going to be working on that very, very hard. He'll also be talking to the Israelis about their intentions and their thinking about Rafah military operations and sort of where they are in the planning stages for that.
The U.S. is also focused on the opening of additional crossings into northern Gaza, which will be critical if Israel goes ahead with its plans for the Rafah operation. In that spirit, Kojat announced Israel's commitment to increasing the amount of humanitarian aid transferred daily into Gaza. The IDF is working closely with its partners from U.S. CENTCOM, preparing to receive the temporary floating pier and to organize the space for receiving humanitarian aid directly in Gaza. The area of the project covers about 67 acres, which are allocated for the operation and the passage of large amounts of goods to the field. The temporary floating pier through which the humanitarian aid will be transferred is being built by the U.S. and will be connected to the Gaza shore.
Over the last few weeks, the amount of humanitarian aid going into Gaza has significantly increased. In the coming days, the amount of aid going into Gaza will continue to scale up even more. This increase in aid is a result of increased efforts, among them opening the Israeli port of Ashdod and a new crossing that was opened into northern Gaza, and increasing the amount of aid coming from Jordan through Israel, entering Gaza through the Kerem Shalom humanitarian aid crossing. Together with the United States Central Command, we're working on a temporary maritime pier known as JLOTS, which stands for Joint Logistics Over the Shore.
It's day 207 of the war in Gaza. 2 reservists were killed and 1 seriously wounded by a blast in the Netzarim corridor. That brings the toll from the ground operation to 263. During the final days of Passover, the IDF attacked about 270 terrorist targets throughout the Gaza Strip.
Israel bonds, the heartbeat of solidarity, the powerhouse of support. When the Hamas-Israel war hit, Israel bonds stood tall, proving we're more than just an investment, we're a lifeline. Investing in Israel bonds isn't just a financial move, it's a declaration for resilience, strength, and a better future for Israel. Join us and let solidarity echo through generations.
And new developments emerging in the hostage negotiations as an Israeli delegation is visiting Cairo today in the hopes of reaching a deal. ILTV's Rachel Safdie is at the Hostages Square in Tel Aviv with the latest. Rachel, what can you tell us about where the negotiations stand?
Hi, Lidar. Well, in the past few weeks, and specifically in the past few days, we've been seeing more and more international pressure on both Israel and Hamas to reach this much-needed deal where we would see a break in the fighting in the Gaza Strip and hostages coming home. And so here's my full report with all the latest on the negotiations.
The Israeli delegation has headed to Cairo as Hamas reviews the offer put forward by Israel over the weekend. Currently, Hamas representatives are deliberating over the proposal and will return with a written response to the offer. The deal is rumored to include a 40-day ceasefire and the release of Palestinian prisoners in exchange for 33 Israeli hostages. The response from Hamas is anticipated in the coming days. A senior official has stated that the Palestinian terror group has no major issues with the latest proposal from Israel and Egypt for a Gaza truce, but historically they have been reluctant to accept such deals. Amidst this, Secretary of State Blinken, on his 7th visit to the Middle East since the conflict began, weighed in on the offer. Blinken, in his statement,
"The quickest way to bring this to an end is to get to a ceasefire and the release of hostages. Hamas has before it a proposal that is extraordinarily generous on the part of Israel. And in this moment, the only thing standing between the people of Gaza and a ceasefire is Hamas."
Additionally, the Israeli government is coming under growing international pressure from its global allies and the families of the hostages to agree to a deal. Thousands protested in the streets of Tel Aviv, calling for the release of hostages. Hamas recently released 2 videos depicting 3 hostages alive as part of the group's psychological warfare strategy, highlighting the urgency for the release of the hostages who have been in captivity for over 200 days. Meanwhile, Israel's foreign minister stated that a planned incursion into the southern Gaza city of Rafah might be put on hold should a deal materialize to secure the release of Israeli hostages. Here's Israel Katz's perspective on the deal.
שחרור החטופים הוא בעדיפות ראשונה מבחינתנו. החטופות והחטופים, ואם תהיה אפשרות לעסקה, אנחנו נעשה עסקה.
גם אם זה אומר לחכות עם רפיח בשלב הזה?
כן.
However, should Hamas reject the deal, many anticipate that Israel will proceed with a Rafah offensive. These developments underscore the delicate balance of negotiations and the high stakes involved.
Experience the power of truth with ILTV News. If you're looking for quality content and captivating visuals, join our news community and become an integral part of our team as we embark on a mission to unveil the real Israel, dismantling the web of lies and misinformation that surround reporting on Israel. By subscribing to ILTV News, you will not only have access to the latest updates, but you will also amplify our message, creating a ripple effect that carries the truth far and wide. Subscribe today and help reshape the narrative. Available on the web, Android, and Apple. And in other news, universities continue to remain at odds over how to end the so-called pro-Palestinian encampments popping up on campuses nationwide in the United States. At Columbia University, protesters took over a building and barricaded themselves inside. Meanwhile, a new poll shows that the majority of Americans do not share these students' activist views and actually support Israel and an operation in Rafah to eliminate Hamas. All the details in the following report. Students at Columbia University on Tuesday occupied Hamilton Hall, one of the buildings on the university's New York City campus. Videos show students with their heads and faces covered vandalizing the building, breaking windows, and barricading themselves inside, blocking the entrances with tables and chairs. In a statement, Columbia University called on all members of its community who can to avoid coming to campus to do so, as it said the safety of every single member of its community is paramount. This latest assault comes after the university began suspending students involved in a 2-week tent encampment set up on the main campus when they failed to disperse by a 2 p.m. local time deadline on Monday afternoon. Pictures posted by the local branch of Students for Justice in Palestine, one of the organizers of the encampments, showed printed copies of the university's terms that were rejected by the group with the words "Columbia will burn" and "Free Palestine" on them.
We will not be moved by these intimidation tactics. You can see outside you now that the students are mobilized. There's hundreds of them here today. They will not be moved. We demand divestment. We will not be moved unless by force.
Columbia University is just one of the main sites across the U.S. where so-called pro-Palestinian activists have set up encampments, demanding that their universities financially divest from Israel. Protests have also spread internationally to campuses in the UK, France, and Canada. Universities remain at odds over how to remove these encampments. While Columbia University attempted to negotiate with the students, other universities have taken a more hardline approach. At the University of Texas at Austin, dozens of protesters were arrested as police dismantled the student encampment, with Texas Governor Greg Abbott saying no encampments would be allowed in his state. And despite the claims of peaceful protests, there have been instances of violence, incitement, violent rhetoric, and anti-Semitism at many of the encampments across the country. As Jewish students say they have been targeted and assaulted in some instances, others also said they were prevented from physically entering their own campus. And while university students continue to protest for a ceasefire, a new poll released Monday by Harvard Capps Harris reveals that the majority of the American public overwhelmingly supports Israel and its efforts to continue the war and achieve victory. According to the new poll, 80% of American voters say they support Israel over Hamas, while 72% said they believe Israel should move forward with an operation in Rafah to eliminate Hamas and end the war. The American Friends of Ben Gurion University will hold a special event next week, Remarkable Resilience Leading the Way Forward. ILTV's Emily Schrader sat down with the CEO for Americans for BGU to hear all about the event and its significance. Let's take a look.
October 7th was a national collective trauma, but directly and disproportionately affected Israel's southern communities. Rising from this trauma, Ben Gurion University of the Negev, the anchor institution and the engine of growth for the Negev region, is today playing a vital role in its rebuilding and recovery efforts. As such, Americans for Ben Gurion University is set to hold a global virtual event on May 8th called Remarkable Resilience, Leading the Way Forward, showcasing this Israeli spirit and resilience. Joining us now with more on the event is CEO of Americans for BGU, Doug Sesserman. Thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
Now, Americans for BGU is hosting this Remarkable Resilience event. What can you tell us about the event, and why did you decide to host it now?
So it's very important for us to be telling the story of what's happening in Israel, both the stark reality of the situation, but also the hope and promise for the future. Annually, we've been putting on a big virtual event. This year, that big virtual event is called Remarkable Resilience, Leading the Way Forward on May 8th. And we're going to tell the story of what happened to BGU on October 7th, but importantly, how the university community has really showed its resilience and is really paving the path for the way forward, both for the university, but importantly for the Negev and for Israel.
Israel recently suffered an unimaginable tragedy on October 7th, and the BGU community, the beating heart of the Negev and the South, was directly and disproportionately impacted. And yet today, BGU is playing a vital role in reshaping and rebuilding Israel's future. How will the event showcase this resilience and this important role?
Yes, so David Ben Gurion said back in the 1950s that the future of Israel would emerge from the Negev. It represents 60% of the land of Israel and still less than 10% of the population. And unfortunately, on October 7th, our community was directly and disproportionately impacted. We have 111 members of our community dead, meaning murdered on October 7th. We have 4 still missing, including Noah Argamani, who became the face of the hostage crisis when she was forcibly taken and separated from her boyfriend, also a BGU alum, Avi Natan Or from the Nova Music Festival. And we haven't heard from either of them since. We've had over 6,600 members of our community serving in Miluim or reserve duty. More than 5,000 of them are students. Some 2,100 are still fighting. So we're in a situation that is really unreal. The future of Israel is going to be great. And it depends on us here in the diaspora and the Israelis there in Israel for us to rally around the best of modern Israel and advance it into the future. And I think Ben Gurion University of the Negev in many ways represents a Migdal Or, a beacon of light that emanates out of the Negev desert, that enables us to rally around all the positive things in Israel in a part of the country that will be vital to its future. So please join us on May 8th.
Doug Sesserman, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
An incredible event that will highlight the real Israeli resilience. And if you want to participate and hear some of these incredible stories firsthand, you can register online or scan the QR code that's on the screen right now.
And moving on, French diplomatic efforts are underway to try to broker a deal to push Hezbollah back from the Lebanese border and end cross-border exchanges on Israel's northern front. Those exchanges are continuing unabated. ILTV's Steve Leibovitz has more.
The cross-border exchanges along the Lebanese border continued over the holiday weekend. Israeli fighter jets struck Hezbollah positions in southern Lebanon. The targets included rocket launching positions, a building used by the terror group, and other infrastructure, according to the IDF. The IDF says it also shelled areas near Atya al-Shab with artillery to remove threats. Earlier, the Lebanese branch of the Hamas terror group launched a barrage of dozens of rockets at northern Israel. Hamas fired more than 20 rockets from Lebanon, targeting the Kiryat Shmona area. Most of the projectiles were intercepted by the Iron Dome air defense system, while the others apparently struck open areas. No injuries were reported. Meanwhile, the French Foreign Minister, Stéphane Séjourné, was in Beirut seeking a diplomatic solution to the warfare. France reportedly removed a provision demanding that the terrorist group withdraw behind the Litani River and instead called for a repositioning of Hezbollah forces without specifying where.
Nous refusons le scénario du pire. Au Liban du Sud, la guerre est déjà là, même si elle ne dit pas son nom. C'est la population civile qui en paye le prix. Personne n'a intérêt qu'Israël et que le Hezbollah, d'ailleurs, poursuivent cette escalade. J'ai porté ce message ici auprès du Premier ministre Mikati, auprès du président du Parlement et du chef d'état-major des armées. Et je le porterai également, ce même message, en Israël dès mardi.
The new proposal also included a ceasefire in line with United Nations Security Council Resolution 1701, which ended the 2006 Second Lebanese War, ensuring the return of residents on both sides living along the border and the deployment of 15,000 Lebanese soldiers south of the Litani. Israel has threatened to go to war to force Hezbollah away from the border if it does not retreat, and continues to threaten Israeli northern communities from where 70,000 people were evacuated to avoid the fighting.
And a terror attack in the old city of Jerusalem on Tuesday has left one police officer wounded. According to the Israel police, the suspect rushed a border police officer near the Herod's Gate in Jerusalem and stabbed him multiple times in his upper body. The officer was evacuated to the hospital for treatment. The terrorist was identified as a 34-year-old Turkish national Hassan Hiklan. He was neutralized by another officer at the scene. According to Hebrew language media, the assailant entered Israel from Jordan one day prior to the attack. And large police forces arrived at the scene, and an investigation is still ongoing. And in other news, U.S. members of Congress have issued a warning to the International Criminal Court threatening action should it pursue arrest warrants against Israeli leaders, saying it could set a dangerous precedent for the U.S. and its other democratic allies. ILTV's William Sharon has the report.
Members of Congress across the political aisle on Monday issued a warning to the International Crime Court against issuing arrest warrants for senior Israeli officials, saying it will be met with U.S. retaliation. Axios reported on the warning and revealed that legislation to the effect is already in the works. Israeli officials are reportedly concerned that the ICC is preparing to issue arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, and Israeli Defense Force Chief of Staff ILTV. The court has been investigating Israel for possible war crimes dating back to the 2014 Israel-Hamas war. In a statement on X on Friday, Netanyahu said that under his leadership, Israel would never accept any attempt by the ICC to undermine its inherited right to self-defense. He added that while the decision would not affect Israel's actions, it would set a dangerous precedent that threatens soldiers and officials of all democracies fighting savage terrorism and wanton aggression. U.S. Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson echoed these comments, saying that the reported warrants were disgraceful. He said that if unchallenged by the Biden administration, the ICC could move on to issue arrest warrants against American political leaders, diplomats, and military personnel. As such, Axios reported that the Republican members of Congress have already started preparing legislation to sanction ICC officials involved in investigating the U.S. and its allies.
And now, since the onset of Israel's war against Hamas, we've been exposed to devastating stories from all corners of the country. One particularly heartbreaking story is that of Orit Mark, who, though having suffered unimaginable loss, continues to smile and see the best in life. ILTV's Ariela Lachiani sat down with her for an interview. Let's take a look.
I have a really tragic story. Sad story, it's my life. In 2016, my father was murdered in a terror attack. Also, my mother, she was seriously injured by this terrorist, and two of my siblings were there. They was 14 and 15, and they was injured. And after that, in 2019, my oldest brother showed me that, he took the place of my father. He was there for us like a father, and he was killed in a car accident when he worked in the Mossad. After that, we thought that, okay, that's all, it's fair enough, it's too much to lose my dad and my brother, and we continue, I don't know how, we continue in life, and I'm doing a lot of lectures in Israel and around the world, and I think, okay, I succeed to deal with this and to continue and to stay strong and smile, and I'm smiling all the time. And after that, we get to the war, 7 October, it was so hard to everyone, but also to us. It was Saturday morning. My youngest brother, we have 10 children, and 6 is 7 after me, he's 22. And he went there, and after that, my husband went to the reserves, and two of my cousins, Menachem and Elchanan Kalmanzol, they went to the south to help the people, and they saved 100 people there. And in Israel, they're very famous and they are a big hero. And unfortunately, in 8 October, with Elchanan and another nephew Itiel, they went to one of the houses in Kibbutz Be'eri, and a terrorist, Hamas terrorist, waited for them, and they killed Elchanan. He was so close to me. My wedding, he arranged everything. And I published my book, A Broken Ray of Light, and when I gave them the book to Elchanan and his wife, I wrote to my second parents. This was our connection. 3 weeks after that, I lost my youngest brother, Fdaya, in the war in Gaza. It was the 3 days after they get into Gaza. And for us, it was like, no way that we're losing again, no way that we need to go to another funeral. 4 funerals in 7 years. It's unbelievable. But it's for the country, for our country. And this is my 4 members that are not here anymore. I think that in life, I'm all the time split my life into 2 parts. The things that are in our hands, the things that aren't. And the things that aren't, I need to put aside, because if I will cry all the time about my father, to my brothers, and my cousin, I'd never deal with this. But if I would say, okay, this is not in my hand, I can cry, but I don't want to do it. I want to be happy. I want normal life. So I don't touch this. Let's take all that energy and things that are in our hands, which is what kind of people we will be in this world. And I think in my life, all the time, every morning, every second of my life, I need to choose. It's not just okay, wake up to a normal life. No, I'll wake up in the morning, my dad is not here, 2 of my brothers not here. I have a disease that I get from the trauma, after our terror attack. Unbelievable. And in the same moment, I need to say, okay, but I have eyes, and I have my son, and he's my angel, and he's the light and the hope in my life. So we have to continue, and we have to be strong, even if it's so hard. And in these days, I'm doing a lot of lectures about that, how we can continue, how we can find the strength to be happy, not to survive, to be happy. And when I wake up in the morning, I wake up with a smile now, because I know that there is a reason why all these terrible things happen to us. But I just believe that now I need to choose how to deal with this. So I choose to live, I choose to be happy, just to make people happier and to try to do the best they could.
An unimaginable and incredible story. And now, let's take a look at the weather forecast. The weather is warming up around the country tonight with lows of around 16 degrees Celsius or 62 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we'll have clear skies with highs of about 28 degrees Celsius or 83 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's all for today's news. For more updates from Israel on all your devices, check out our ILTV channel, subscribe to our ILTV newsletter, and don't forget to check out our website, iltv.tv, with all the latest news from the heart of the State of Israel. I'm Ladar Gravelazi. Be well, stay safe, and thank you so much for watching.